What's popping, YouTube? What's popping is pop out chat on the YouTube studio creator feature thing. I'm trying some new technology here, trying to streamline my setup so that we have minimum time fussing with technology, and that we have more time getting down to the meat of stuff. Isn't that what is useful? Right? As people are rolling in, I'll give a couple minutes before jumping in and going into my notes and stuff, because the show really gets going when other people join. Checking the soy cord, that is the Discord, seeing if anybody has anything to say to me in those channels. Of course, if you type in the Google, the YouTube chat, whatever you write is going to be put up, so if people are watching the stream later, they could see what you're typing in the chat. I enabled the live chat replay stuff, so if you have like a question that you're more than happy to share publicly, I would recommend going ahead and using that. But if there was something you wanted me to discuss or you want me to go over that you don't necessarily want published and associated with your digital ID online, then by all means go ahead and ask me somewhere else. You could even slip me a piece of paper and say on the next stream, hey, talk about this and that, and I will do so. I'm a big fan of paper technology. Been using like lists and stuff, to-do lists. We're going to be talking about these topics today as well, about good old management and business science and all sorts of practical and juicy topics. So, okay, well, I think what I could do is I could jump into talking about today's topic, and I'll be watching the chat as well, so if people are rolling in, I'll address what you have to say. Otherwise, there is tons of stuff for me to cover, so I will just go ahead and get started. So, today's stream I've titled Executive Function Stream. Why this title? Yesterday I did a stream. I called it, I think, Functional Members in Society stream. So I'm going off this idea of functions. When we're talking about functions, we're talking about, in the technical sense, like mathematics or programming, functions, they have some input and they turn it into an output. So insofar as we're functional, quote unquote, functional members in society, what that means is we're able to provide some useful role to the establishment, taking some input and producing some output, and thereby being functional in the sense of inputs and outputs. So this term function, it's fitting in this sense. So just an example, let's say you work at Burger King, you make Whoppers and stuff. You have a particular role to play as a legal person, as a W-2 employee, whatever you are. Your job is to give your time and your attention to be at certain hours at a place, and you take some inputs and you generate some outputs. And if you're able to do that successfully, to do your function, then you get paid a certain amount. You give away a certain amount in taxes, as one must do in this world, and then with what you take home, you have a good deal of choice over what you do with it. So you're a function. Now, let's just jump really quick and talk about AI and robotics and all this stuff. So insofar as we look at and we understand people as being functional members of society, you're playing a role as a person, as a certain function in society. Insofar as those roles are standardized and managed, what that means is that that role can be replaced by an AI or machine. So actually, I'm going to write this down really quick. So we'll talk about the meaning of function here. See last stream, which we called functional members in society. Functions take some input, give some output. Insofar as being persons in the establishment, we carry out a role as a function and are compensated accordingly with establishment, and we'll talk more about this words too, credits. And those credits, so payment, money, which shows that the establishment can trust you to be a good function. Being a good function. Cool. We've been joined by a guest. Hi, Hecka, my fellow corpo. Yes, a lot of us friends here are now working corporate jobs, and so one of the purposes of this stream is, as I'm somebody who's read, business books, like self-help type of literature, taken mandatory trainings and all that. So one thing I would like to continue to do in this stream is to unpack this new vernacular, this jargon that we're being given, and look at what these words really mean. So in a certain way, maybe your your corporate boss should give me some money, give me a raise for doing free training, because what I'm actually doing is saying, let's listen seriously to what people are saying in these corporate trainings. Let's actually look at what is being asked of us, what we're learning at school. What are they actually telling us to read, to master, to think about, to be obedient to? And I'm saying, let's actually take what they're saying seriously and understand what there is of value there, what it is that there is to learn, because I think that there is a lot. So we'll continue on this theme. So for executive function stream, as I said, function, we could think of it as a role of a person in a society. Another way in which people use this word function, which is related, is actually being able to do stuff. So if you're talking about let's just say, a person, they have some sickness or disease, you could say are they functional? It's saying are they able to actually carry out a role and do certain stuff in society, or if they're not functional, I mean they're so debilitated by whatever they're suffering from that they're not able to say go to school and participate as a student. People also use the word function, as in this term, executive function, which usually in psychobabble, psychology language, is talking about the ability of somebody, say you want to do something, say I'm going to go for a run today. Okay, so from that thought, how well is somebody able to implement that, or to actually go ahead and do that? So insofar as somebody is able to do what they say that they're going to do, to have a thought and to actually carry out the plan that they have, we would say of that person that they have strong executive function. People also relate this idea with I think the frontal lobe cortex. Let's take a look. So executive function, when people talk about this, they're talking about being actually able to do what you say you will. What happened there? Associated with psychobabble about the frontal cortex or prefrontal cortex. So let's take a look at. We'll do some visiting of the establishment, see what they have to say about that. So I'm going to search executive function. Oh, Harvard University. So we have a trusted source. Let's take a look at what Harvard University has to say about executive function. Oh, they even have a picture for me. This is great. Okay, what is executive function and how does it relate to child development? So I'm just checking here. Oh, we're joined by another guest. Hi, Reaper. Welcome to our executive function fellow executive. We're all joined together at this function using another sense of these words. Okay, so we're on, this is by harvard.edu site. So let's look at what is executive function and how does it relate to child development. All right, I'm reading. The phrase executive function refers to a set of skills. These skills underlie the capacity to plan ahead and meet goals, display self-control, follow multiple step directions even when interrupted, and stay focused despite distractions, among others. Okay, so actually let's copy this down. So here I'm showing you what is one way to do executive function. So for instance, a technique that I use a lot and I think is could be quite useful is if you want to say focus, pay attention, or study and do something, if you don't tie it to some kind of action, you're going to have a really hard time. So for instance, one thing I failed a lot at over time is if I just say something abstractly like, today I'm going to study Chinese. But if you don't have a clear plan or something to do in front of you, it's going to be very hard to just abstractly study Chinese. Now, on the other hand, if you have a ready objective in front of you, something you want to accomplish, and it could be something very simple. So like, let's say to study Chinese every day, what I do is I write down 10 words that I don't know. Okay, that's like a task you could do. Now, how do you find 10 words that you don't know? Well, you could start to try to read something. You could go to, a word list. There's many ways in which one could come across 10 words that you don't know. What's essential here about what I'm saying is that you have some material goal that you could do, actionable things in front of, and if you have something like that, then lo and behold, you could go ahead and make progress. You could actually have executive function. But if I just stay at the stage and I'm just saying, I'm going to study Chinese, then my executive function is going to fail because I don't have something to do. Anyways, so here I'm saying, we're looking at this quote here on executive function, and as a demonstration / practical thing to do, I'm actually going to type out and write this quote so that we can pay attention to the words that are used. So, phrase executive function refers to a set of skills. These skills underlie the capacity to plan ahead and meet goals, display self-control, follow multiple step directions even when interrupted, and stay focused despite distractions, among others. So in order to even type that thing, so we're getting super meta here, I had to look at the screen, look at what I was typing, use my elite hacksaw touch typing skills, and type out a thing. And if I were to look away and do something else and get distracted, that would be like a failure because I would lose my place where I'm looking in the browser, and then it would take additional time and effort to correct myself and bring it back. Anyway, so executive function here, I think this Harvard definition is pretty good. Let's continue and look on here. But first, let's be distracted. Just kidding. The purpose of this chat is for us to come together, so it's not a distraction. We're intentionally looking at what you will have to say in the chat. Reaper says, is executive function like an executive MBA? Yes, in many ways it is. So it's talking about self-control, your ability to regulate yourself, but we could also see how in corporations and businesses and things like this, Basically the executive is treating like the company like their kind of body. So just like how you might tell your hands to do something or tell your feet to do something, why can't you tell your driver to do something or tell your remote assistant to do something? All right, Hecka notes, but the brain doesn't fully develop until later in life, mid-teens. Yeah, that's another topic we could talk later. I'll add it to the bottom here. Future topics, timeline of brain development, maturity, etc. We could also talk about infantilization of culture. That's another topic to talk about. And we could talk about things that retard / accelerate senility, potential for regeneration, etc. All these topics are very interesting and related to what we're talking about, so I'll just mark them down here. Oh, sorry, I wasn't showing my notes, but I'll mark them down here, and we'll talk about them at a different time. But I am looking at the comments, and that seems like a cool thing to look at. All right, let's go back to our info view. So, executive function. Quote, much like an air traffic control system at an airport helps planes on different runways land and take off safely, executive function skills help our brains prioritize tasks, filter distractions, and control impulses. Okay, so overall, I think that this Harvard document is doing a very good job at laying out definitions and saying specifically what we're talking about. So, in vernacular kind of colloquial language, we're looking at, the science of how is it that you actually get people to do stuff and to do what you tell them to. So it's laying out a kind of technical jargon to talk about this. All right, Reaper says, can you do an etymology thing about executive function? Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Any guesses? I'm guessing like execution, has to deal with like completion of a sentence, maybe even like in the judicial terms of like executing a prisoner. So we could look at that. Execute function, and we'll just do this pretty casually. Heading just call it practical questions. Headings title here is not so important. We could change it later. We have to have our executive function. So we're just putting something in here, and we could even flag it, placeholder. And then if I wanted to refine these notes or turn it into something more developed later, I would go and I would change, I could search the word placeholder, find everything where I wrote placeholder, and then I could edit and modify what I had written there into something that's more acceptable. But by just having like a strategy, like a word placeholder or something that I write here, now I have an effective strategy where I don't get stopped, I don't have a blocker, I could plan ahead, meet goals, and stay focused, and now this is no longer a distraction because I have a way of handling the problem and moving on. Business. Executive function. Brilliant. Okay, let's look at Wiktionary. So we have in the chat, Hecka says, executive function. The brain is a computer. It sends commands to your body as it executes functions such as moving your arm. Exactly. So like with this the computer analogy too, we can see once again the relationship between computers, management, business, like all these things are related. The computer is an example of a like perfect servant. The computer will always do what you tell it to do insofar as the computer and whatever setup you have is programmed well and stuff. Unlike a person, the computer does not delay in its execution. It does exactly what it's told. On the other hand, a lot of what management is trying to do is saying like, oh, I'm frustrated. Why can't people be more like computers? And so we'll go into this later, but that's a lot of what the behavioral psychology stuff is about. It's trying and the gamification stuff. It's about how to treat people like computers only they're biological. So instead of with zeros and ones doing it, you dispense like sugar water at whatever intervals to basically force people to do results. All right, let's really quick look at the etymology. Execute. Okay, from Latin. Executus. Accompanied, pursued, executed, or accomplished. So I mean, I think it has a pretty similar meaning in Latin, the old usage as it was used today. Oftentimes, one strategy I use is I look for like the definitions where they call obsolete, and then those ones will actually reveal like what the word actually means before it got corrupted. But for this particular word, none of these, it doesn't say that they're obsolete. So I get the impression that this word like execute, execute a program or whatever, the current usage is actually pretty close to what it's meaning in the past. To carry out, to put into effect, to perform, with the program to start or to run. So I don't see any issues here. So actually this one is surprisingly the same in contemporary usage. And then let's check out the word function and see what function means. Cool. All right, we have some more comments. Reaper says brain.avoid psyop. Okay, so later in the stream we're actually going to talk about this very topic of psyops and also how do you defeat psyops. And I bought this book from a YouTube video creator, the Deep State Encyclopedia, Exposing the Cabal's Playbook, by the YouTube creator Really Graceful. Maybe I should tag her, and she'll promote my stream on her stuff. Anyways, there's like a useful definition of psyop in the Deep State Encyclopedia, so we'll be talking about that and some insights about how to defeat the psyops. Hecka says, managers send commands to their subordinates or slaves before DEI. The slaves then execute subcommands to do paperwork. Yeah, so it's another topic we could look at is the old IT language that is now being modified. So, e.g., in the past, slave and master relationships between, I think, like different hard drives, etc. And we had we could talk to you about like what is server and client, where does that come from? Lots of interesting things there. So I made a note of that. We'll get back to that. All right, let's check the etymology of function though. All right, function. Old French from Latin, functio, performance, execution. So here, this is looking like it's very similar in meaning to the original sense. And then I'm looking down here at the definitions, and none of these is not saying like obsolete. So Reaper, that was a good suggestion actually to look at the etymologies of execute and function. And I think both of them, surprisingly, they're pretty similar in contemporary usage. So contemporary usage compared to past usage, which is cool to look at. It's like function also has these other senses, like an official or social occasion. So that's why I was making a joke here. It's an executive function, and that insofar as all of you are executors, executives, if we're gathering here together for this function, we're all executives at a function. So it's an executive function. Pretty fitting. Okay. So let's return to our practical question at hand here. Now that we check those definitions, okay. So I'm back at the Harvard thing. We had a definition of executive function. We'll just look at briefly at the end of their infographic here, just so we could all be on the same page and have a similar starting point, because I'm not sure how much experience people have with this psychobabble. So Harvard says, no one is born with executive function skills, but everyone can learn them. Quote, our genes provide the blueprint for learning these skills, but they develop through experiences and practice. The foundation is laid in infancy, when babies first learn to pay attention. Relationships with responsive caregivers are particularly important at this stage. Something as simple as playing a game of peekaboo can help build the early foundations of working memory and self-control as a baby anticipates the surprise. So here we could notice immediately that in the Harvard thing, we're having these terms being used that all have computer analogs. So we'll just write some of them down. So working memory, so we could talk about like RAM in a computer. So let's make a note about this. We'll call this computer and human equivalencies in the Harvard article or infographic. So the concepts of like working memory. What else do we see? Okay, so even talking about this isn't really a computer specific, but responsiveness. For example, like is the printer responsive if you press buttons? So we talk about machines in these words, which were probably there, I'm assuming, before we were talking about machines. We would use these words for people. To respond to my email. So the same sort of language that we use when we're talking about computers, we're also using when we're talking about people. And then this idea of self-control, and I pointed out in the past that the word for self-control is also associated with regulation, meaning having rules. And government has the sense of one's management of one's own members, or even like steering of a ship through rules, policies, etc. So all of this makes intuitive sense of what's being said here, saying like just out of the womb, infants, children, they don't know how to manage or to rule over stuff. So we have to learn how to behave by rules. We have to say like, why is it that we follow the instructions of other people? Why is it that we like moderate how much we eat? All these different things. These are all stuff that a baby right away doesn't seem to know, and then they have to be raised properly to learn these things. Oh, we're getting this juicy word. I see the word a framework. We've talked a lot about that word, framework. In fact, I'll pull up my article there because we'll talk about frameworks in a bit. Frameworks. Okay, cool. Adults set up the framework for children to learn and practice these skills over time by establishing routines. Another one. Routines. Like being a program. Breaking big tasks into smaller chunks and encouraging games that promote imagination, role-playing, following rules, and controlling impulses. These techniques are known as scaffolding. Just as a scaffold supports workers while a building is being constructed, adults can use these activities to support the emergence of children's executive function skills until they can perform them on their own. So once again, like, good job, Harvard. I actually think that all these paragraphs are quite... they're informative and revealing, and they give pretty clear definitions of these terms. And you could see, as I said, the clear associations and analogs with the computer machines. All right, another paragraph. These skills typically develop most rapidly between ages 3 to 5, followed by another spike in development during adolescent and early adult years. It takes a long time and a lot of practice to develop them. But as children's executive function skills grow, adults can gradually allow children to manage more and more aspects of their environment. All right, heading. Building the children's executive function skills benefit everyone. Quote, the increasingly competent executive function of children and adolescents enables them to plan and act in a way that makes them good students, classroom citizens, and friends. In turn, this helps them grow into adults capable of juggling a multitude of commitments, such as parenting, employment, continuing education, and civil involvement. Even health is affected. A strong executive function helps people stick to healthy habits and reduce stress. The more a society invests in building the executive function of its children, the greater dividends. Oh, we have some money language. Interesting. It will see in the future. Cool. So, what we see here, let's just have some observations about this Harvard infographic observations. So, this is a Christian stream, so let's just explicitly say it. This infographic is about making well-governed, well-behaving people without God. And I'll add, and repentance. So the idea here is like, we could all be good boys. We could all be good people. Basically, we can all be good people using science and techniques to live productive lives. Oh, let me switch the view. Productive lives. And here, like that final note about how, final thing about investing in children paying dividends. I don't know. This doesn't strike me as particularly human or loving language. This doesn't strike me as particularly human or loving language. And I want to note too, okay, with this Harvard thing, it's like everything that it's saying about humans and what we're trying to do, nothing is being asked of children. And then we're talking about related with executive function. That cannot be done by robots or AIs. And I think this is crucial here because this whole notion, all this talking about executive function, the equivalence with the computer language and all of this, there could be some good, valuable insights and stuff for getting work done, but essentially it's reducing people down to these like functions, and talking about how to train a person to properly fill that function. And insofar as we can make machines and robots to fulfill that function, then it means like people are obsolete. So if you develop like put it this way, okay, if Harvard is describing people as being productive, like good people, members of society, insofar as they could do the stuff that's talked about in this infographic, parenting, employment, continuing education, civic involvement, blah, blah, blah. Insofar as people could just be replaced by programs for that, Harvard is implying that like people are useless. And actively, we could see that AI, robots, digital governments, all that stuff is being used. People are developing that sort of stuff in all of these areas. So as an example with the like the parenting example would be this various educational TV shows, increased daycare, all this stuff. It's about saying like, how do we get children to have less times with their parents and then more time for just the establishment, basically to run the program, to do stuff. So less actual people involvement, more having, educational TV, games, whatever it is. The games is a big one. We'll talk more about that. Of course, employment. So has your position been made redundant? Are they going to replace you with a bot? Continuing education. Like, how do schools? I guess they need students and stuff for funding. But that's something that could change and shift over time. Just like in recent years, if we've seen big fluctuations of an increase in enrollment in universities and colleges, why can't we see a rapid decrease in involvement? It's all these things are pretty flexible. And then as the health stuff, it's like maintaining a properly working machine. So they want you to be healthy insofar as you could perform certain roles. They don't want you having a mental breakdown such that you can't do what they need you to do. And stuff like civic involvement, all these things, it's all computerized now. So all these things are things that like a machine or like a legal person or corporate person or whatever would be able to do. Cool. All right, so we have a couple comments here. So, Reaper makes a note about the United States. He says, side note, Founding Fathers called the chief executive the President of the United States, specifically being inspired by the corporations at the time. So I think, Reaper, that's good note. Chief executive, President of the USA. We have corporation language being used with governance. And I think at this point we could all kind of appreciate the fact that the United States, in many ways, it's like a corporatocracy, oligarchy. I don't know what exactly we call our system, but clearly there's a lot of, like even voting, like people talk about voting in the term of like, corporate boardrooms and stuff. So, okay, Reaper says, so we can ask ourselves why the U.S. specifically has an, quote, executive branch, end quote, that is distinct from the legislative branch as opposed to the UK Westminster parliamentary system. Yeah, so if anyone knows more about, Brit things, feel free to chime in. As an American, I don't look much at the British. Hecka says, executive function is a socio-economic phenomenon. It is used to ensure children or adults fit the mold of the establishment and ensure they are capable of generating profit for the establishment at a later date. Notice the use of money-based language in that article. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to be talking more about this, where if your idea of what a person is about is ultimately about sort of efficiency and profit in a material sense, I think that it's kind of inevitable that you steer in that direction, rather than like you're looking for efficiency and things like that. We're not talking about like what are some other goals that somebody might have. Like we're not talking about maximizing, say, like aesthetics and beauty. Like if we're trying to maximize aesthetics and beauty, do you get like little weird cartoons like the ones that we're seeing here? I think we could all agree that this like framework blue blob people stuff here, this is not peak aesthetics. We could talk about if these graphics or these things are like useful for illustration purposes, and I think that they actually do a very good job of like reflecting the, we can say something like reflecting the spirit of what is being talked about and how it's being conveyed. This document is actually a pretty good exemplar of of what we're looking at. So that's funny. All right, let's switch back to our notes. So, practical questions of business science. Okay, how do we get unmotivated people to complete large, complex projects? And so the science of executive function is, as we were looking at, like getting children to be people that could do a good job at certain stuff. Now we're going to turn. We're not going to focus on childhood development stuff in this stream. Instead, we're gonna look at, all right, so once somebody is like a well-functioning adult member of society, what are the things that they're doing? And so an answer that I have right here, it's interesting, it matches up with that Harvard article. So I said, break a larger task into smaller manageable pieces, add an appropriate accountability structure so nothing, quote, slips between the cracks, end quote. That is, one cannot simply forget to do something. If something is not completed, the system will catch what is missed and take the appropriate persons. Take the appropriate persons with fixing the issue and quit. My grammar got screwed up there. We'll just leave it here. As catch what's missed here. It's a try and catch block for those people with some programming experience. So for instance, you might try get the customer to buy product, catch, so let's call it a not interested failure, follow up with them one more time with call center offering special promotional deal. So an effective system, it's like it must sell no matter what. It must execute the sell function. And so there will be, things that you try, and then even if like something fails, like, oh no, we failed to, secure this lead or whatever, then you'll have like control flow and things that are used to deal with that and try to recover if possible. So all of this is part of executive function. Just as a practical example too, like we talk about this, let's say like I want to go running. So try to go outside to take a run. Step 1, go and put on your running shoes. Okay. So putting on your shoes easier than, running 5 miles. So if you succeed at that, do this. But let's have so you put on your shoes, you're like heading out the door, and then it's like step 2, like fill up a bottle of water. Now if you like fail on that stuff, oh no, I'm out of water, I guess I'm not going to run. Then you might have catch. Go to the store down the street and buy a bottle of water. That's not an excuse not to do what you're doing. So catch exception. I didn't have water, so I'll die if I run. by finding another way to get you water. So a lot of business processes would be about like catching these like errors, exceptions, trying things, and making sure that if you have a little inclination, like a little desire to do something, that indeed what is being tried actually gets done. Cool. All right. So now I'm going to switch. I'm going to kind of transition to this topic of. So we talked about executive function and how the establishment wants to try to do it in a sort of, let's just say, agnostic or neutral way. As I mentioned, like with the Harvard article, there's no relationship to, or no mentions of like God, or like you should do this to honor God, or because it's the right thing to do. Like all of that language is pretty absent from it. So what are the reasons that people are doing things? So in an absence of, let's say, like a traditional morality, or it's like a worldview understanding of like what is pleasing to God, how is it that people are motivating themselves to do things, or what's going on? And I think, in short, the answer that psychology provides is basically using like feelings or incentives. So, for instance, like a lot of people, they could just straight up be motivated by fear. Why do you do what you do? Well, because if I don't, I'll get locked in a cage. Like, why do you pay taxes? Is it because you think it's right, or it's like because if I don't, then people will make my life like so painful and miserable that it would just be easier if I paid taxes. So I pay my taxes basically because I'm coerced to pay taxes. Similarly, people might say like, why do you go to school? Why do you do this or that? I think like for a lot of people, the answer wouldn't be like, oh, because it's my duty as a citizen of the United States, blah blah blah, like all these things. It comes down to a type of force or coercion. It's like, well, because if I don't, then how could I get money? How could I buy food? Like, what am I going to do? So that we could call this a kind of negative motivation. So why do people do certain things? Oftentimes, the reason why people do things is simply because they have to. Another example related with executive function and the psychology stuff that I could think of is, like, let's say you have, like, in your life circumstance, like, let's say you have a problem with, like, spending too much money or gambling or something like that. And it's like, yeah, whatever. You kind of blow it off. Then you come to the place where it's like, look, if you don't deal with this problem, you're going to be kicked out of where you live. You're going to lose your house. If you have a family, your family will leave you. Like all these things might happen. Then it's like, all right, at this point, then that person might actually decide to turn things around, because there's so much of a negative motivation of, okay, really, if I don't do this, all these bad things will happen to me. Using bad here in a colloquial sense. We could talk more about the nature of good and what evil is or isn't at a different point. Anyways, the point being here, the negative motivation is saying, I don't want, painful things to happen to me. And so somebody might turn around. So that sort of thing, it doesn't really require any explanation. But I think a lot of people, if they just heard about that, they would regard it as kind of like barbarism. It's not a mark of like a high civilization or something. When people think of that sort of threat, like when people talk about China being bad, I'll be like, why China bad? Well, China, it's a dictatorship. And if you don't do what the Communist Party says, they'll lock you up in jail. So this is like ultra, super normie, like, way of talking about these things. But this way of speaking about things and thinking about things is very widespread. And we could say that a lot of videos, publications, etc., kind of push this way of thinking of that you can't, in the United States, we value ourselves on not having this purely negative view of motivating ourselves. And in that way, people tend to think, well, I don't want to say people tend to think, people might think of themselves as being more free in a sense. So in what way are they more free? And that's because they think that they're doing the executive function. The reason that they do stuff is for some kind of positive motivation. So let's just write some notes here. We could call negative motivation, we'll call that aversion to pain or punishment. This may drive someone to execute. So another word, maybe driven by necessity, might be one way to look at that. But in the United States, right, a lot of people, they are not driven by necessity. And so they have to be driven by something else. Why do people even do stuff? This, I think, is one topic we could broadly investigate under this level of positive psychology. So, so-called positive psychology, as opposed to just quote-unquote fixing problems, the approach is to go for pleasant states. For example, achieving wellness or mindfulness or something like that. Other examples of quote-unquote positive goals would be wealth, let's say comfort, prestige. So these are all things that people might labor or work for, and thus develop strong executive function. Let's check into chat really quick. So Hecka says, that sounded pretty pro-comrade. Tom German, your social credit score has increased. I think, what's a Russian word? Tovarish. Cool. My social credit score increased. Yes, winning. Okay, back to psychology stuff. So, positive psychology, rather than what negatively motivates people, we could talk about how people are positively motivated. And so, of course, the wealth, I don't think we need much explanation for that. We could add, okay, so in the United States, prestige and stuff, I think that this sort of thing is often associated with wealth. So, like in the United States, we have the Silicon Valley hoodie sweater CEO types. And, a lot of people, whether explicitly or not, they identify such things as kind of cool. And so they're trying to act like, it's like trying to be chill is like a sign of prestige and showing off wealth. Another funny thing I heard was like, people, nowadays, if you have a tan, it's kind of like a sign of wealth in a way, in that I have leisure time to chill and hang out on the beach. Whereas if you don't have a tan, like you're pale and pasty and stuff, then that's saying that you're actually like a more poor person, because you're like locked in the office doing stuff. Okay, anyways, so going back with the psychology stuff, what the establishment tries to do is, of course, there's the negative motivation aspect, which doesn't require much explanation. The positive psychology stuff is dangling carrots in front of people to basically try to bribe them in order to execute, to do things that they want them to do. Because you could ask, like, why else would somebody slave away and work these long, difficult hours? Why would people do that? Right. So, what are these goals? Essentially, the establishment is trying to treat people like dogs. I think this is it's no coincidence too about like why dogs are so popular and everyone's like talking about dogs. Is because I think it's like an implicit thing. People are so used to be like being treated like dogs that that they actually literally like and hang out with dogs and stuff all the time. It's like we're obsessed with dogs. Like why are people so obsessed with dogs? Because they're treated like dogs, and they think about the highest good in terms of dogs. So, what forms does this take? I think oftentimes what we see is the executive function, getting people to do stuff. This is managed in terms of, for lack of a better word, psyops. So I'm going to flip open this book, the Deep Sight Encyclopedia, and let's just take a look at what a psyop is. And then we're going to talk briefly about Edward Bernays and about how this is basically like the this is how like the nerves of the establishment work. We're all in this we're all in this system together. But understanding, where these switches are, how people are trying to motivate each other, and so on and so forth. I think it's valuable because you could willingly enter and participate in the system, but while also knowing what it is. Like you could be in the matrix, but not of the matrix. All right, so let's talk about psyops really quick. So I'm reading from this book. Okay, a psychological operation, also referred to as a psyop, is a military or political tactic that aims to sway a target population's feelings, attitudes, and behavior. These operations typically involve the use of various communication channels, including social media and mainstream media, to sway the beliefs and behavior of a particular population. Psyops could be employed for a number of things, such as, bullet point, distributing knowledge to combatants in an effort to change their attitudes and behavior. So that would be, do you motivate for people for war? Do you demoralize a population? You might use a psyop to make the enemy not motivated, or to get your people ready for war. Okay, bullet point 2. Convincing a group of people to support a certain cause or political agenda. All right, I think that one's pretty clear. So associating, this idea of having celebrities and stuff associated with a certain agenda, like Skittles rainbow thing, etc., etc. The goal of this is saying oh, if celebrity person I likes this thing too, then I should also like it. So all these are psyop techniques that people might use. All right, smearing a rival military or political force. So China bad. They don't respect freedom, etc., etc. Another bullet point: fostering a positive perception of a political figure or a government. So I saw this funny meme the other day. I'll post. Ruth Gators Ginsburg. It was like a person, children's book. It was like a person holding up one of these books in front of a kid, and then the kid was crying. Well, it looks like, okay, they've updated her look a little bit. It looks like she looks more friendly in these ones, but it's not hard to find unflattering pictures of this individual, and how a child might not react favorably to that. Anyways, I'm just giving that as an example of with the psyop stuff, because just losing my place in my book. Fostering a positive perception of a political figure or a government. So you can clearly see that it's in the objectives of the powers that be to make people positively view certain things and programs, and also at the same time to create false dichotomies. Biden made up this new federal holiday. I think it's a Monday called Juneteenth. Okay, so I read Wikipedia briefly and looked up what Juneteenth is. Okay, so nothing inherently wrong with African American people being African American, and it's you are what you are. You don't have a choice in the matter. So let's just be on the same page of obviously, you shouldn't be racist or hate people and be disgusted with people because of things that aren't of their choosing. Okay, we're beyond that. We aren't even gonna have that ultra super lowbrow dumb discussion. Okay. On the other hand, you don't have to be identify with like everything that is associated with a particular label. And so in order for YouTube to not ban me, I'm going to use like my Asian privilege. So let's look. Like I saw this billboard that Disney was making some new like Asian American film. Okay, here we go. Here's their show. I haven't actually watched this or looked at this, but I just want to give like an idea of how in the media and stuff in real time we could look at how certain objectives or things are being pushed through. So it looks like Disney Plus, they made this new thing that's called American Born Chinese. And of course, we're going to see anything but Christianity. So, some magical Monkey King LARPing stuff. Let's look at what this is about. Based on genre-hopping graphic novel by Jin Yang, American Born Chinese tells the story of Jin Wang, an average teenager. That's another term to look at. I heard the word teenager might have been like a Time magazine / CIA creation, and people didn't really talk about quote-unquote teenagers until pretty recently. And what does average mean? Like, just a normie. Juggling his high school social life with his home life. When he meets a new student on the first day of school year, even more worlds collide as Jin is unwittingly entangled in a battle of Chinese mythological gods. So it's like what is this kind of being like a Chinese fantasy LARP show? Like what is this about? What does Vanity Fair say? I could bring up. Let's go to Panda Express's website too, because he talked about Panda Express last stream. Panda Express. I mean, these people have been. I've been impressed at how often they continue to like update, refresh, and like they're being very intentional with their branding, and forging this new sort of like Asian American corpo culture. Like, say whatever you want about, your opinions. Oh, it's not real Chinese. Like, whatever. Like, shut up. Let's just look at their marketing and stuff like that. Like, this is pretty slick stuff. They're having fun. Everyone likes their little, like, puns, dad joke, clean stuff. So people see this, like, green, some Chinese motifs. So it's all viewed as very... let's just generally say like positive stuff. So it's just like, oh yeah, we're just celebrating these things. They embracing the Chinese American thing. Like they aren't trying to pretend what they're not. So Chinese flavors with American tastes. Got some modern fancy video and web design. Family owned with family values. So of course, those sorts of terms sound very good to people. So let's just look here. Okay, we're looking at like Panda Express. I want to give this as like, this is an example of what we were talking about with the positive psychology. So in most people's minds, if you just like go around and talk to people, if you're like, okay, what is it that you're about? And then you showed them the sort of content that you could see on this Panda Express website. Here, for instance, I'll just explicitly say it. They're not like pouring out all the rainbow flags and all this stuff. I mean, this is just like maximally milquetoast, non-offensive, like, hey, we're just like positive Asian people and we like cute pandas and like celebrating our culture and like tasty food. Like if you hate on this, you must be a like just a bigot. So like this is the Asian Americans recently, I think that they've really been mastering and embracing this role. Look, here we have like the corporate style art. Let's just read a quote here. At Eating Establishment, we are committed to building positive and meaningful connections in our communities. So, like, all these words here, like, nothing objectionable if you're just a normie, okay? Positive and meaningful connections in our communities. But then you could ask, what does positive mean? What does meaningful mean? And on what basis are these communities founded? You know, like, the way I'm going to say this, I'll probably get accused of being, like, cynical or something. But does positive and meaningful connections in our communities, meaning, like, taxpayers are generally respectful to each other in a context of consuming food and carrying out transactions? Like, have we reached that low of a bar of positive and meaningful connections in our communities? So it's like basically erasing as much as possible is like what actually, like what means what. Meaning is kind of been erased, and this is what I'm saying about treating people like dogs with this sort of positive behaviorism type stuff. It's like reducing down people to like, can you be a polite animal? All right. Hecko's funny. He says, Alan doesn't know that you could pick your race during player creation. I don't know. Maybe that will be like revealed to us one day, that it's like you actually did make a choice in these matters, but then you forgot. Like, I don't know. I don't think that that's the case, but if it turned out to be the case, I don't think that necessarily conflicts with any dogma, but I don't know. In any case, a lot of the manner of how we live our lives and what we become, it is up for us to decide, and a lot of it isn't. So we get more faceless corpo graphics. Of course, we're all about the COVID-19 pandemia. We have the furry suit visiting the schools. Soul Disco. Alright. Enough Panda Express. Let's flip back to our notes here. So, psychology, they want to treat people like a dog. And basically what the psyops are, this is how these goals and these things are reinforced in people. Just a couple more points for the thing I was reading. The practice of governments using propaganda to defend their policies and keep the public on board during times of conflict, and the use of false information and fake news to sway the results of a political campaign or election. And then this is the author's commentary on this. I don't necessarily agree with what's being said here, but I'll just read it. It is crucial to remember the psyops can be employed for both beneficial and detrimental outcomes, as well as to sway public opinion in both democratic and authoritarian regimes. Additionally, psychological operations are not just used by the military or the government. They can also be employed by private groups, businesses, and people. Psyops are effective because while physical wounds heal, operations inflicted on the mind follow an individual throughout their entire life, shaping their behavior and how they perceive the world. So when I say I didn't agree, I would say that one could argue that certain techniques, like here it says, psyops can be employed for both beneficial and detrimental outcomes. I kind of lean towards the view that generally speaking, psyops are just evil. Like, you shouldn't use them. But, nuance, bro. You should have nuance, blah, blah. So I'm not going to comment further on it. But let's just say, psyops are obviously out there. But often, if you research them, obviously they're there. But they often appear under different names. So I just wanted to quickly highlight a couple different ways in this might done. So this comes from this book again. So here's the entry on philanthropy. Okay, it says, quote, in a morally bankrupt culture, philanthropy is a means of reputation laundering for the wealthy. Instead of providing the disadvantaged with what they require without conditions, philanthropists set up shop for profit with all their cronies, devastating local economies and ecosystems in the process. in order to avoid contributing to social support networks for the same peasants whose labor they exploit. They obtain a large tax deduction. They then add, quote, philanthropy, end quote, in the form of, quote, charitable gifts, end quote, to media outlets so that no one can ever uncover their misphilanthropy. The generosity of billionaires is a control mechanism. Billionaires who find, quote unquote, independent media are known for this type of behavior, like with Pierre Omidyar and The Intercept. They control the flow of information and they hire investigative journalists only to shelve their projects, so the truth collects dust for the rest of eternity. Jeff Bezos has applied a similar technique with his purchase of the Washington Post. The idea is that they can use their influence to eliminate stories they dislike. The same applies to international aid, such as the Gates Foundation in Africa or the Clinton Foundation in Haiti. By sending funding to corrupt local governments, they ensure that their preferred corporations have inexpensive access to the nation's natural resources. So oftentimes, this goes along with the ideas of just celebrities and stuff generally. The way in which psyops are at work is campaigns by the people that have the money to hire journalists and so on and so forth. And we're just going to look at Edward Bernays really quick to look at the history of how these sort of techniques have been rolled out in the world. So, talking about this fellow Edward Bernays. All right, let's start. American public relations pioneer Edward Bernays is frequently referred to as the father of public relations. He was born in Vienna, Austria in 1891 to a redacted family and was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. Bernays and his family immigrated to the United States when he was a young child. He started his professional career as a journalist, but soon moved on to public relations, a field just beginning at the time. So here, just want to bring attention to this term, public relations. If you say the word like psyop, people say you sound like you're a paranoid schizo or whatever. But if some person is just talking about, I got a degree in public relations or whatever, most people don't bat an eye, not realizing that the whole nature of public relations is basically being, a manager of psyops. All right, continuing. Surveying a variety of clients over the course of his lengthy career, including businesses, governments, and nonprofits, Edward Bernays, is best known for his work in corporate public relations and for swaying public opinion through manipulation and psychology. How? Cite. Give me some examples. In the 1920s, Bernays' work for the American Tobacco Company resulted in one of his most well-known campaigns. The company wanted to expand the market for cigarettes among women when smoking was primarily perceived as a habit for men. To march in the 1929 Easter Sunday parade in New York City carrying a Torches of Freedom banner, which was a pack of cigarettes. We'll touch more on this later. Torches of Freedom banner, which was a pack of cigarettes. Bernays hired a group of debutants. The media extensively covered the campaign, which assisted in shattering the social taboo against smoking by women. His work for the United Fruit Company, which helped improve the company's reputation among Americans despite its history of worker exploitation and its role in the political unrest in Central America, was another notable campaign. Bernays' work extended beyond business. He also collaborated with the American government during World War I and the U.S. Information Agency later, during the Cold War. Writing frequently throughout his career, Bernays' works include Crystallizing Public Opinion, 1923, and Propaganda, 1928, both of which had a significant impact on the field of public relations. And of course, also as of note, Bernays is the paternal great-uncle of Mark Bernays Randolph, the co-founder and original CEO of Netflix. And so we see that we have these, what the schizo term, psyops everywhere. I mean, it is kind of true that like psyops are everywhere, but the terms that they often will go under will be stuff such as like public relations. And so let me flip back to the browser really quick. Like if I search for something like public relations jobs, or say public policy jobs, these are going to be like all the sorts of stuff in which you could apply your skills as a modern psyop worker. Oh, so it's using my location of Sacramento to give these. So that it might be a little bit biased here, because Sacramento does happen to be the seat of government. But let's just look really quick at some university sites that offer degrees and things related to public relations, and the sorts of things that you do. So, public relations major, what will you be prepared for? This is just some examples. Marketing coordinator, copywriter, fundraiser, direct marketing spokesperson, media buyer. So you can own the media. Investor relations. So you can get money from George Soros. Account executive, public information officer, employee relations, production coordinator, media planner, special events coordinator, researcher, counselor, marketing manager, art director, media relations, marketing communication, freelance writer, strategic planner, multicultural relations, government affairs, and sales representatives. Take a look at one more article. County of Orange, California. What do they do? So just normal accounting. Families and Communities Together program. What's that about? All right. Smiling people. So social services type things. Anyways, obviously you can see like, people like this, it's just like the Panda Express site that we were looking at. They want to put forth a particular image. And note here, I'm not saying that like, all these people are evil or something. There's various jobs and stuff in society, and you could have, people that are working for good in those roles and people that aren't. We just have to understand like the social structure of what our society, a lot of is we're swimming in a sea of psyops. And then you have to determine for like various different parties, like, do I want to work with this party, or do I not want to work with this party? For instance, like I've said many times on this stream, we're using YouTube, we use Google, I use Amazon, and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying that any of these things are inherently good or bad, but sometimes people do show their true colors, and sometimes it'll be a mix of like good and bad stuff. And so you have to be aware, that you get these various parties that do have objectives to push, and they're going to use psychological techniques in order for you to have positive or negative attitudes about what they're doing. So it's just like, once again, we'll go back to like the topic of dogs. Like, what are the stereotypes for dogs? Like dogs, they're friendly, they're loyal, other people are like often grumpy and stuff, but dogs, they'll always kind of be chill and treat you well. And so all over the place, especially in these like upscale type shopping centers, you're going to see like pictures of dogs with their tongues out being all happy and stuff. So they take that image or something that people might have an emotional connection with, and then they associate dogs, with anything else that they might want to promote. All right, let's look at this one writer's profile really quick, and then I'll hop back to the notes, and we could wrap up. All right, so we have this writer here covering culture and celebrity. So what do people think of? Is TikTok turning Fashion Week into pure chaos? The professional try-hard is dead, but you still need to return to the office. How Elon Musk became the internet's new main character. She invented quote-unquote adulting. Her life fell apart. She wants you to know that that's okay. Okay, so just looking at this sample of headlines, what sort of narrative is being told? What kind of state of people is being captured? I mean, I would say that a lot of these articles, they're kind of targeted towards like my demographic, maybe more so Asian American females, the female equivalent of my demographic. And what are they trying to do? So basically, it's saying if your executive function is failing, it's saying like that's okay, and they're citing their author here, and they're talking about. So basically, this is like a Band-Aid, trying to make people feel better about the fact that the establishment promised them stuff, and it didn't work out. We continue to see a promotion, so attention of celebrity culture. So this isn't explicitly said, but by having articles on people like Elon Musk or talking about what TikTok does, this is drawing eyes to Elon Musk and TikTok. So it's like it's your attention. You could focus your attention on any number of things, but of all the things to focus your attention on, like who decided that Elon Musk is quote unquote the internet's new main character? So if you're watching and looking at all this mainstream media, all that stuff, then naturally Elon Musk is gonna be like the the main character of the internet. Like if you go on YouTube and you search like anything AI or technologically peripherally related, inevitably you're gonna return to Elon Musk like within 1 or 2 clicks. It's gonna be ridiculously fast. So it's almost this like kind of fatalism where there's this PR campaign, all this stuff is being thrown at you, and then these articles come out of somebody that's like a little bit closer to you as like a consumer of this content that sort of intercedes and interprets this stuff for you. So these journalists, it's kind of like with a church analog, they would almost kind of be like a local parish priest or a deacon or somebody who they aren't like the core establishment people themselves, but instead they're like a point of authority by which you might interface with the establishment. We're joined by another friend. Hi, George. Welcome. We're talking about psychology gone bad. All right, let's flip back to the notes. So, psychology, treating you like a dog. We looked at PSYOP, psychological operations. Let's add there. Oftentimes, when PSYOPs are implemented, we get more friendly sounding household terms like public relations, or this is like a more recent term that I've seen in a bunch of places, community ambassador. It's like, so the establishment has these people, the community ambassadors. Like you have your Indian village, everyone's like doing what they're doing, and then this guy's like, oh hey everybody, we need to have this like Bill Gates technology in our village, otherwise everyone's gonna die of scurvy or something. Like I don't know. And so the establishment point of contact, getting into a lot of people's business, would be these community ambassador type positions. Cool. I wrote another note here. The notion of information warfare is about parties using psyops to fight other parties using psyops. So, like, I'm living in the United States. Does the U.S. use psyops? Absolutely, the U.S. uses psyops all the time. Oh, so does that mean that China and Russia are the good guys, and you think they don't do psyops? No, it's like no, like they all use psyops. They might use like different psyops or be promoting like different messages, but I talk about the U.S. stuff a lot because I'm talking about like the sickness and the sins of my own nation that I'm a part of. But other nations, other places, likewise, like Russia, for instance. Russia, they'll have their own psyops and stuff that they use on their people. China, they got their own psyops and stuff that they use on their people. The mistake, though, would be to have some kind of viewpoint like, oh yeah, in the United States, we have freedom, unlike in communist China. Like, that, my friend, is a ultra brainlet, naive, retardo way of thinking. That's not how it works. And looking into the history of stuff like the history of public relations, like Edward Bernays, like all that sort of stuff, I think you're gonna pretty inevitably come upon the sort of stuff that I'm talking about. Oh, there was also one other juicy article, short thing in this book. Overall, I'd say this book, it's an index of various topics. So like for just a quick idea, for like a couple paragraph description of something, as like the quote unquote conspiracy introduction, I think it's been pretty useful. All right, so let's look here. The Greek word pharmakia can be translated as sorcery or witchcraft. So this is the word from which we get pharmacy. It is mentioned in the Bible, particularly in the books of Galatians and Revelations from the New Testament. Pharmakia is referred to as a form of rebellion against God. And these passages, and is listed alongside other sins and transgressions. The use of drugs, potions, and other substances to change one's perception or level of consciousness is referred to as pharmakia in the Bible. The word has a Greek root that can mean either medicine or poison. This implies that pharmakia is viewed as a type of spiritual or religious deception, whereby individuals use drugs and or other substances to create the illusion of power or enlightenment. According to some Christian sects and academics, pharmakia also refers to the use of drugs and potions in early pagan rituals, which were frequently connected to divination and necromancy, or talking to the dead. Hold up, I'm being distracted by a phone buzzing and making noise. But where did it go? It stopped. No, it's keep on going. Oh, here it is. Apologies. I just had an alarm set. Oh, I was too late. It did. Well, I'll shut it off. It comes up nice. Anyways, so along here too with this idea of psychology and treating people like dogs, this idea too of pharmakia is saying, okay, just based on reality, the sort of psyop coercion method of trying to set up the world like this big game, it doesn't naturally work. So in order to force it to work, that's why we see the push of all these various sorts of drugs. Like for example, coffee. It's like naturally, if you're making people look at things that aren't beautiful, that don't naturally make people feel light, enlivened, and so on and so forth, you're going to have to use more forceful methods in order to keep people motivated. So that could be like the negative motivational techniques we're talking about, like just straight up threats. Or it could be like, drugs. Like, why is coffee shielded everywhere? Probably because a lot of stuff is just boring and it sucks. So you have to give people like coffee so that they could like fixate and tolerate stuff that would otherwise be intolerable. Checking the chat. George says, United States has quote-unquote freedom to eat cans of ham. Excellent transition. So let's go from here. So the psychology, treating you like a dog. Right, so these systems in place, they... let me switch over to my info view. An executive function. They're trying to get you to act, and they're trying to motivate you based on basically cheap rewards and feelings. And this view, I will say, contrasts sharply with the Christian view. So you may have heard the quote, like, you either serve God or mammon. You could say, like, a lot of the treating people like a dog, this is basically teaching people to serve mammon. Because you could think, like, all the rewards that the establishment offers, these are all things you could buy with money. So, like, you could buy, rent a nice penthouse in a fancy place. You could buy drugs. You could buy sex. You could buy, you could buy, like, all sorts of things. So what is being offered as the sort of positive results is basically anything that you could more or less buy with money. You could buy time off. I think some of this is like, the powers that be, they're trying to like charge people and make people pay, even for like, water, food, air, space, what in the past it might have taken as like, given or God-given. Even now, this stuff has come under the domain of the establishment. So I want to look at some quotes here that's building off what George was saying about freedom as in America, freedom to eat cans of ham. And I think this is a good point and transition to swap into our positive view, or a positive view I'm going to express here, which is how I'm currently understanding the Orthodox, the Christian perspective on executive function and how we're supposed to be motivated and do stuff. And in short, the answer is we're supposed to be motivated and moved by love rather than and love of God. So rather than love of money and all these cheap rewards and stuff that's being offered, the Christian is moved by love for God, which is reflected in love for one's neighbor. Okay, so let's look at this quote. This is from my Substack. So below is a quote from the book, The Saint of the Prisons by Monk Moise, holding up the book right now, on the life of Valeriu Gafencu of Romania. So, in that book, question: what then is the freedom of a man? Answer: it is the environment in which human personality develops. It is the condition of human responsibility and also the justification of man as king. Question: what is the difference between freedom and liberties? Freedom is a condition. Liberties are rights. Liberties define and at the same time limit freedom. Freedom lies in spirit, and liberties like in the letter of the law. So along with what George is saying, in America, people often think of freedoms probably in a sense that is closer to what is being described here as liberties. You have like in America, you could go to Costco and order like 3 large pizzas and eat them all. Like, you have the liberty to do that. But a person that does that, are they living a life of freedom? And I think we would all agree that no. I mean, they're enslaved to their gluttony or something. At least that's what it would seem like. Maybe not. Don't judge other people. It could be that this person has to do this task for some reason. Like, who knows what's going on? But like for myself and for my own personal experience, like if I run down to the store and like buy cans of hams and just start like eating them, it's probably not going to be coming from my freedom. And here, the justification of man as king, because when you're exercising freedom, it's the condition of human responsibility, justification of man as king. So you're acting as a human being in the proper dignity when you're truly free. However, if you're being a slave to bribes and rewards, what I was saying in the notes, like you're being bribed as a kind of dog. Psychology is teaching you like a dog. You're losing your dignity as a human being, and instead you are submitting to being bribed by these cheap, corruptible, perished things. So here in this quote, freedom lies in spirit, liberty is like in the letter of the law. So when you're truly free, you could rationally choose and govern, say, this is, I could see how this could harm me, so I'm not going to accept it, blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, if you're being swayed by public opinion surveys or whatever, you're being controlled by other entities and forces, the cravings and the passions of the body, and you are not truly free. All right. So I had some other notes about various topics. I don't think we're going to read them in full, but we could begin to touch on some things and leave room for future streams. So I had this general idea I was looking at and starting to write about, and this is related to the executive function, which is that of obedience. And so let me talk about this related to psychology, treating people like a dog. I think a lot of the ways in which people try to quote-unquote positively motivate people these days is the illusion that people are doing what they're free to do. So, like, lots of people, for instance, if you're striving very, very, very hard, say to, like, own a home, then the proximal reason for that might be that, like, oh yeah, well, if I own my home, then I'm more free in a sense, because now I don't have to, I don't know, worry about being homeless or, whatever. So people will get themselves in various very complicated financial relationships, borrow money here, work a lot of hours here, make all these trades in order to attain a type of freedom. So let's see. Okay. On the other hand, it's like in the Bible, in Christian teachings, we see some ideas that are quite different from that. So, for example, with the idea of obedience, it's like, how does one become free from anxieties? Well, the difficult Christian answer is if you're obedient to God and you lay aside your anxieties because you're choosing to trust God and just work and do what you're supposed to do in front of you, then that is the real you can find true freedom there. You don't find freedom by building up infinite fortifications and making your Osama bin Laden compound in the middle of the desert or something. Like, that isn't the path to freedom. Instead, freedom is if you have a correct relationship with like God, who provides so all good things come from God. Then what is there to worry? What is there to be anxious about? Now, what's ironic, I don't know if ironic's the right word, what's very difficult for the modern person to understand is that comes through getting your own self-will under control. So what we often think is like our own will, it's like what I want. Like, I really want to eat pizza right now. So insofar as you identify with yourself as the craving for the pizza, or the craving for more abstractly, like gluttony or lust or whatever it is, and you identify that as yourself, you've been psyoped, psyoped by the demons, basically, because you're identifying with your passion. However, if you could voluntarily submit and get your passions and things under government, under control, and the only way to do that is it's like through being obedient to Christ and His commandments, then that is how you truly become free. The nota cultura I have here, I just remember that phrase from like textbooks in Spanish class in like middle school and high school. It's like looking at this contrast a little bit of how is it that one is truly free. It's actually kind of through obedience and stuff. You could see like historically, I have this blurb here in Wikipedia about the Ronin, the drifter or the wanderer, the samurai who no longer has a master. And in many ways, this was viewed as a undesirable or disgraceful state. And the reason I think, so this is me kind of developing ideas and working on this, is that I think, through being obedient and through trying to do somebody else's will, like God's will, and the people that God is working through, this is how you gain real freedom and power. It's through, like, love is the engine. It's like what's driving us, and including love for truth. That's like an essential thing. You can't love the lie. You can't believe the PR campaigns. You can't believe the establishment propaganda. But if you're driven by a real love for truth, basically you have infinite energy and power to motivate yourself, or like you're moved to work and to do things, and you have like very strong executive function. Why is it that you have strong executive function? It's not because you're expecting like an ice cream cone at the end of the road, but if you have just such strong love for God and for God's people, and working through that, you gain this super strong executive function, which the godless people are trying to force in all sorts of ways, whether it's through their psychology studies, their psyops, like all these things. There's this power that's given through love that like only could really come from God, and you get these parties that are trying to steal it and use it for themselves, and they succeed, to an extent, like here and now, but ultimately that energy is dissipated and those works come to nothing. So I think there's a lot more to say on these topics. I don't want to brush by or be dismissive of those meaty, important things. So I think I'll begin to wrap up the stream here. But yes, let's just say summarize and wrap up what we were saying about executive function. So we could see, beyond just the individual, as a society, talking about how people organize themselves and how people try to get things done. Executive function, business management, research, like all of this is it's like a science. It's an area of study, a field of study about how it is that people actually do stuff, how it is that people get things done. The pattern of the world at the end of the day, manifested through these it's like PR departments and all this stuff, is to try to bribe people with these cheap, perishable rewards. I don't know, maybe bribe isn't the right word, because like nothing wrong with working a job and receiving your fair wage, but it's like it's a lower, lesser good to do that than to have the way of life, basically. I forgot which disciple said this, but said to Christ, like, where else will we go? You have the words of life. So Christ, Jesus, love, it's like the real thing that permits executive function and allows us to truly live. However, that way of truly living, it necessarily involves a bunch of pain and suffering, like Christ was crucified. However, by willingly choosing that pain and that suffering, you are not a slave to pleasure. So you're not a slave to the pleasures and the things money could buy and the bribes, but you're actually truly free, with freedom as king and with human dignity. And as much as the establishment might try to torture or kill people or do whatever they do, thousands and thousands, maybe millions of lives of saints, of the martyrs, the witnesses, attest to the fact that love conquers all. God wins in the end. So with that being said, I think to wrap up the stream on executive function, and as the main takeaway message, I'll say this too to remind myself that seek ye first the kingdom of God. Try to do what is pleasing to God, to do that, and then you don't need to trick yourself with cheap psychological truth. You don't need to be motivated by drops of sugar water or like amphetamines or whatever. Those things are passing. They're tools at times that might be useful, but ultimately they are the real free person has those things superseded or subjected to the stronger spiritual force. It's our executive function. How is it that we rule over our bodies? Like the spirit ruling over the flesh is something that I think we should strive for and we should go for. And I believe that is only accomplished through Jesus Christ and the Orthodox Church. So yes, be blessed, viewers, and thank you for joining. And if anyone has any other questions or comments or things that they want to talk about in future streams, let me know. And if these streams, I continue to get like positive feedback on them, so I'll keep on doing them as long as people want to see what's up. And look forward to seeing you more later. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.